According to the Joe Biden campaign website, today the trajectory of COVID-19 in America is headed in the wrong direction. In some parts of the country, the test positivity rate is climbing, hospitalizations are skyrocketing, and testing sites are overwhelmed. Donald Trump's catastrophic failures, he says, of governance have led to tens of thousands of needless deaths and economic pain for tens of millions of Americans. We, he says, are only 4% of the world's population, yet we have 25% of the world's cases and deaths. And the United States is barely better equipped to manage the threat of COVID-19 today than we were 6 months ago. Every day that the President, Donald Trump, wastes not acting, he squanders the sacrifices of the American people and sets our response and recovery back even further, says Joe Biden. Over the last 4 months, Joe Biden claims that he has laid out comprehensive plans with 5 basic elements that he would do as president to address COVID-19. 1, test and trace. 2, sufficient personal protective equipment, PPE for all. 3, science-based treatments and vaccines. 4, steps to reopen safely and effectively. And 5, protecting those at high risk, including older Americans, who today represent over half of fatalities, even in the state of Virginia. Joe Biden's first priority as president is, he says, to confront this public health crisis with a national mask mandate. But already he is showing signs of trepidation for enacting this plan. Rather than a sweeping executive order or passing a law in Congress to implement what he has called decisive and immediate action, Joe Biden has said that if states don't agree with his request, then he will travel around the country to ask mayors, which is just on the surface in no way able to deliver quick results to reverse what Joe Biden has described as a nation heading in the wrong direction. But at least he doesn't have to ask the governor of Virginia to mandate masks, which will make one less person to ask to take this swift, decisive action for which many Virginians voted. But for a moment, let's look at the Biden COVID-19 plan. And immediately, the National Mask Plan has another gaping hole, besides having to wait for every mayor in the nation in which a governor disagrees. The National Mask Mandate is Joe Biden's strategic defense initiative against an invisible enemy and a novel coronavirus. And when that plan was proposed to prevent the intercontinental strategic ballistic missiles, many rejected that plan years ago as simply ludicrous, contemplating that it would not be scientifically feasible to create a defense system that would be able to block or destroy the infectious dose presented by nuclear warheads, especially warheads contained in missiles with multiple launched reentry vehicles or MIRV technology. And the focus in that debate was centered upon what quantity exactly had to be blocked to define success. This is a task that persons in Israel every day confront with inside the Iron Dome, trying to block missiles coming down into Jerusalem. But that quantity of infections or infectious dose has yet to be articulated by Joe Biden, by the illustrious Dr. Fauci, or even Ralph Northam, the nation's only physician serving as a state governor. And it is not difficult to determine that quantum, which calls into question even the credibility of these claims of protecting the American people. For over a century, medical science has known how to determine the exact quantity of a pathogen that is required to be delivered to create an infection in the elderly that the nation's only physician serving as state governor failed to protect. And an issue, ironically, that Mayor Justin Wilson of Alexandria swore to record was a non-justiciable controversy, protecting the elderly. But now that is the plan. For over a century, epidemiologists have used kosher postulates to validate a pathogen as a cause under criteria satisfying the rigorous scientific standards. And as a part of this validation process, a scientist will introduce a suspected pathogen to a healthy human cell in a laboratory experiment to attempt to test the hypothesis and to evaluate what occurs. See what happens. Yet, going in the wrong direction, scientists, with the support of Dr. Fauci, who Joe Biden and Governor Ralph Northam supports, have introduced COVID to various rodents, like ferrets, hamsters, birds, canaries, but apparently lack the technology to isolate a human respiratory tract cell, perform a biopsy. Normally a very easy task if you have ever had a biopsy performed, and attempt to introduce SARS-CoV-2 particles one by one to determine the exact infectious dose, just like had been done for tuberculosis decades ago by scientists who determined through this systematic scientific approach that it took exactly the transfer of 10 bacilli to a healthy lung to create a disease condition of tuberculosis through infection. Yet, if for whatever reason that method might be determined to be unfeasible or rejected for any other reason, there is another very, very, very simple test to determine infectious dose for any communicable disease, especially one that, like Ralph Northam has repeated to Virginians, is a highly infectious disease. And that is through what infectious disease control personnel and experts have been doing for decades, a task which not only the epidemiologists began on day one in China, but which even the territorial island government on Guam began immediately. Tracer contacts, a task that the nation's only physician serving as a state governor did not even mention until 1 month after he had locked down the entire state, and which 1 month after announcing a masking mandate, having announced bold plans to hire 1,300 new personnel in April, and immediately collecting over 6,000 resumes, had only hired 168 new people for this priority one task in June, a day one infectious disease control action. And one has to seriously question why, especially a doctor, might delay performing this day one critical task. With tracer contacts, a list of persons with whom an infected person has come into close contact is compiled, and under strict clinical protocols, those persons are contacted and tested to determine if they too have developed signs of symptoms of infection. Very, very easy. And from this hard empirical data, a scientist can easily determine a percentage of infected persons doing very, very simple math to report what is often referred to as an attack rate, like for measles, which has an attack rate of 90%, or smallpox, for which 6 out of every 10 healthy persons that comes into contact with an infected person will develop that disease. However, propitiously, a recent infection by the governor of Virginia has brought about conditions to provide America, all Virginians, an immediate determination on this critical pandemic information. Dr. Northam has stated, even after recovery, that COVID-19 is a very highly contagious disease. After all, he got it. And during that announcement that he and his wife had received a positive test result, he told the world press that he had begun a robust tracer contacts plan about himself. So the only thing that is required now is for Governor Northam to provide the percentage of persons that he infected before being identified and placed into quarantine, based upon his tracer contact that he said that he performed, and provide this information to Virginians, the press, and all Americans at his very next COVID-19 update. And that would certainly be doing the right thing by ethics and science. My name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, I am running for governor of Virginia. Stand with me, and together we shall overcome. Honest. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.